On the Majority Report, yes, it's Casual Friday, folks. And as such, I am wearing my soft-colored shirt and welcoming to the program from the Uber blog Hullabaloo, Digby, or Heather Parton. Heather, what do you prefer? Like, what do you...
I swing both ways, Sam. Whatever you want to call me is fine. Digby, Heather... Either one works.
Well, I call you both. I just wanted to know if you had a preference. Because we have a new, one of our new producers, Jamie, wanted to know. And I was like, I think she likes both.
Yeah. I mean, I answer to both, and, whatever works in the moment is fine with me.
All right. Well, let's start as we look back on this week with, there's sort of a perfect... I don't know. This week I felt like was like a closed loop. I mean, putting aside for a moment, we spoke to Steve Clemens the other day about North Korea, and maybe there's some of that is involved in this. The concerns that we're going to end up, causing the deaths of millions of people on the Korean Peninsula. Let's
put some little concerns there, yeah.
Right. Let's put that aside to the extent that we can. But there was sort of a closed loop this week, it feels to me, with the praise that Jeff Flake got at the beginning of the week for doing something that I didn't think was terribly brave. The desperate attempts for, it seemed to me, the corporate media, the mainstream media, to praise him and to find like there is actually some goodness in the Republican Party. And I would say even amongst the so-called resistance to a certain extent. And then sort of this sort of very easy slide into like, it's all about Clinton scandals again somehow. And with the backdrop of what is really sort of going on, which is the Republican attempt to slash taxes on rich people. I mean, it all seems to be part of a whole to me.
Well, it is. I mean, look, they're operating on a number of fronts. But, yes, they want their tax cuts, but they're also fighting off a very serious scandal. The Russia scandal. And they're also, as you mentioned earlier, there are some geopolitical issues that are, obviously rumbling underneath the surface here that may, or, we're sort of making the assumption that the half-hearted effort by Jeff Flake and Bob Corker and John McCain at the earlier in the week may have been at least partially driven by the knowledge that they have that something very dangerous is happening with North Korea, and combined with the attitude toward the Iran deal is kind of, I mean, we're in a nuclear crisis, which, we're sitting here going, gee, look at all the stuff that's going on. Well, that's the one that's going on that's got me losing sleep at night, because that's the one that could really just hurtle out of control in a moment's notice, and there's no turning back. So that's underneath the surface of this whole thing. So when you look at, the tax cuts, which it almost seems to me like that's like, once we get the tax cuts, then let nuclear war happen. That seems to be the Republicans. They're so hyper-focused on just doing this one thing that's their white whale, their holy grail, that they can't, that they're willing to put up with anything to get it, which is it's just a real comment on the obsessiveness of the Republican Party at the moment. Or maybe it's just that they're backed into a corner and they figure, well, this is the best we can do. I don't know. But yeah, the week was very interesting in that way, because you have all this stuff happening with Jeff Flake, and you know, the commentary was at the time that this is set off. It's ignited the civil war within the Republican Party. This is it. They're all going to start tumbling like a bunch of dominoes. That, you know, people were drawing the allusion to the day that Goldwater and Howard Baker and those guys walked up to the White House.
People were talking about like
Nixon, that he was done. You know,
famous backbenchers and have you no shame and
right.
This is befuddling to me. This is a guy who figured out I can't win my reelection. So, okay, I can't win my reelection, and now I'm going to, you know, get something out of it. I mean, that's what it reads to me.
I'm a little bit more sympathetic to Flake than you are, I think. To me, you know, I don't know what his motives are, but I do know that a lot of the reason that Jeff Flake tanked in the polls is because he was, before anybody else and beyond anybody else in the Republican Party, was anti-Donald Trump. I mean, this is not like, he's not like one of these other guys like Corker, who was there basically kissing the ring and trying to become Secretary of State with Donald Trump. Flake had been a harsh critic from the very beginning. He didn't vote for him. He told his constituents that he didn't vote for him. He came out and was, you know, I mean, he basically, his numbers tanked because of that. Jeff Flake is not, you know, some kind of a moderate guy who, you know, just has become, like, you know, there are those that have left, like guys like Charlie Dent in the House, who, you know, was kind of a middle-of-the-road establishment Republican who, you know, didn't really feel like it was great to be such a harsh, you know, right-winger. Jeff Flake is a hardcore right-wing libertarian Republican who never deviated from the Republican line. He was always someone who could be counted on, and in fact, Donald Trump could count on him. He voted with him, you know, something like 97% of the time. So this is not like, this wasn't an ideological thing. This was purely because of Donald Trump that Jeff Flake was losing his seat, because he was an apostate who went up and said what he really believed, and what, by the way, we know many Republicans believe about Donald Trump, which is that he's an unfit, inept, you know, demagogic, you know, imbecile, and has, you know, is mentally deranged. I mean, he was saying that stuff long before. So I give Flake credit for the fact that his loss in that election was completely due to this. So I think that he has some credibility in saying something, and knowing that he was going to spend a ton of money, you know, other people's money, by the way, to defend a seat that was not going to, that he couldn't win, and that would require him to soft pedal his criticism. So that's his line, and I am, you know, unlike you and others, I'm willing to give him a little bit of credit for that. Now, here's where the problem comes. He walked out that night after he gave this soaring speech on the Senate floor, and everybody's crying, and Mitch McConnell is, you know, patting him on the back, and John McCain is giving him a attaboy, and he goes and votes, you know, the way he's always voted, with Wall Street, along with John McCain and Bob Corker and everybody else, on that arbitration bill, in which they defanged that part of the consumer protection, you know, financial protection bureau's
anti-arbitration,
you know,
right.
Yeah, so he goes and votes for that in lockstep with every other Republican, except for some weird reason, Lindsey Graham and John Kennedy from Louisiana, but they only did it because they didn't need the votes, right? They had enough to do it,
right?
You know, so but they, you know, it was a lockstep vote, and you know, at the end of the day, you're going, well, okay, so Donald Trump is crazy, we know that, and you said it, and good for you. But, you know, you still go out and you still vote and you still do all this stuff, and you give him a big win, and you help him basically get reelected by, you know, enacting the agenda that all these other Republicans want him to enact.
I would add,
you know, so
also,
what good does it do?
You come out specifically and say, no, I'm not for impeachment. I mean,
yeah, that too. Right.
Like how, like this is why I think it's a little disingenuous. Okay. Because, and what's interesting, but you know, I think the reason why he had to be critical of Donald Trump early on is because of the population in Arizona, that the immigration issues are really his only sort of ideological split with Donald Trump. And I think he just couldn't thread that needle. I think that was the problem for him. And he made a decision, and he stuck with it, unlike, I guess Ted Cruz, right? Who Donald Trump went from the world's greatest scumbag liar to a pretty good guy. Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos